Let us pray. Father in heaven, you are amazing. You are one of a kind. You are the only God there is. You give us guidance in our lives. You direct our paths. Now this day, as I tell the story of what you've done in my life, while it's 78 years and I couldn't tell everything, pick out those things, Lord, that my brothers and sisters need to strengthen them, to lift them up, is my prayer now in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, Warren said it. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. That's my life story, and that's what he had said. It's our life story. Every time I sing it, I think about what God, the blessings God has poured upon me. I mean, although John Newton wrote this song many years ago, it's still my song. And I hope it's yours too. I was, about a year and a half ago, I was sitting and talking to Paul Bernard. If some of you know Paul, he's the head elder up at Waterloo Church. And we were downstairs eating, and I was telling him all the blessings that God had done in my life. And he says, you need to share this. And I thought, no, I don't think. No. He said, could you come up to the church up there and share your story with me, with the congregation? I said, well, okay, I guess I can do this. I was really reluctant, and I began to study, but write down the things that God had done in my life. And I ended up calling him up and said, well, Paul, I can't do it with one sermon unless you want me to give an hour and a half sermon. He says, fine, do two then. So I ended up with 2 sermons on it. And I didn't think much about it. I gave it. And then I'm here, maybe it's been 6 months ago, and Rebecca McDowell got up and gave a testimony, her life. And it was moved me. I mean, there are stories in the Bible that move me, but these are people I don't know. I know them in a sense, but I don't know. They're not living witnesses. And we're to be living witnesses. And I thought about that. And then Sharon got up. And she gave, and again, I'm moved. Because her life story, she's a living witness. We all are living witnesses. And I thought, we need to tell our stories. Each one of us has a story. And by telling a story, we can lift others up of what God has done for us. And I want to tell the story of what God has done for me. I grew up in a Christian home. We were Methodist. My mother and father did everything they could to raise me up in a Christian atmosphere. Now, were they perfect? No, they could have done better. But it's not my part to judge them. They did what they could. I raised my children. Was I perfect? No, but I did what I could to teach them about God. And the lesson title of today is Lessons Learned. And the first lesson I learned, I've got 7 lessons. The first one I learned was, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. It doesn't say that they will remain faithful all the way through, because I didn't. While I was at home, I went to church. I did everything I should have done because I loved my mother and father. I would do everything. They sent me I went to Sunday school every Sunday. I attended a vacation Bible school. They did the best they could. In fact, it was during vacation Bible school that I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And you think, well, maybe that was the end of it. No, that wasn't the end of it. Because what happened, I didn't know the whole truth. I accepted God because I feared him. Not feared in the sense of reverence, but fear in a sense of fear, because if I didn't accept him, I was going to burn in hell forever and ever and ever in excruciating pain. That's why I didn't accept him for love. I accepted him for fear. I love my parents. I wanted them to be proud of me. We grew up on a farm in North Dakota, and some of you know North Dakota. I know Rebecca knows North Dakota. I grew up in a little town called Edgeley. She probably knows where that is. Most of you don't. Mother and Dad. We weren't rich. I didn't have many shoes. I have my Sunday go to meeting shoes I could put on, but most of the week I was running around barefoot. And I could run across rocks like you wouldn't believe, and pebbles and stone. I can't hardly step outside. It's painful. But I could then. Feet calloused. Didn't bother me. We worked hard, German family. We were German nationality. We worked very hard all the time. And when I went to school, I couldn't play in sports. If you want to expend energy, you come home, you can clean out the barn, you can milk the cows, you can throw down the sows, you can haul the hay, and there's always things to do. So that's the life I grew up with. I loved farming. Farming was a thing that was the main desire in my life, to farm. If anything I could do, it would be to farm. I loved it. I wanted to be outside all the time. I wanted to farm. I think I was probably 10 when I finally got the first tractor. I was out in the field at 10. B. John Deere, harrowing, pulling a 20-foot little harrow behind. I remember coming in black as can be. I mean, because the dust would just roll up, and I was black. And I always got a kick out of making my sister mad at me, because usually I'm so black. I would wash my hands up to the edges, and otherwise I was black because I didn't wear a shirt. I was black, my face black. I would clean up my eyes, make them white, and my mouth white so I could eat. And she was always so mad at me. You know, but what brothers do for sisters, they do whatever they can do to make them mad. And that was me. I was a typical child. While we didn't have a lot of the riches that a lot of the world was, I didn't feel that we were poor, because we had a lot of other things. We had loving, caring parents that loved us. Now, I said I like farming. That was the thing I wanted to do most than ever. But I think I was probably 11 or 12, somewhere around there. And my mother said something about, well, your name's been in the paper again. You were in I was in 4-H, and I said, yeah, well, you got to have your name in the paper if you're going to be governor. I go, and she said, what? I said, I want my parents proud. I said, I'm going to be governor of North Dakota someday. That's it. I love my state. I love my country. I'm going to be governor. And I was sincere about that. And that's from about 11, 12, I don't know exactly, but from about that age. And I looked up what happened, where the governors came from, what they did. And they were all North Dakota citizens. They had to be. They almost all of them grew up on a farm. Well, I had that. I checked off that. It was kind of like a bucket list of things they had to do. They were all college education. Well, that makes sense. I got to go to college, because you learn things in college that help you be a good governor. I knew that. The third thing, you had to serve in the military. If those three things, you had all of the basis you probably needed to be governor. I idealized my country and my state. And when I say that, I'm looking back at it. Idealize is very close to the word in the dictionary called idol. And we think our country can't do wrong. We think our state can't do wrong. We're in for a big, rude awakening, because they can. But that was my mindset. That's how I grew up. I still believe this is the best country in the world. But it has its faults. Well, to accomplish my dreams, to accomplish all these things I want to make my parents proud of me. At 17, I joined the National Guard. We had a National Guard unit in town. I joined the National Guard unit because I'm going to be serving. That was check one, military. You love your country, you serve the military. And I was going to do that at 17. And when I was 17, I was 17. My dad acquired double the farm size. We had tractor, what do we need to farm X amount of land, and all of a sudden we have 2X. We have twice as much land to farm with the same equipment. That year, the neighbor's husband died, and she came over to my father and said, would you care? I want to give you first chance to rent our land. You're a good farmer. I want you to rent our land. My dad said, man, I don't know. I just took on twice what I had, and I don't want another. Her acreage is smaller. He said, I mean, I don't know if I can do it. Let me think about it. I wanted to farm. So what did I think I did? Dad, could I rent it, do you think? Would you rent it for me and I'll farm it? Well, we don't have a, I'll work day and night. I'll do whatever it takes. I love farming. That's my dream, is to farm. And he agreed to it. So at 17, I became officially a farmer. I took my National Guard training. I took that in the winter because I had crops to put in the spring. So, and you could arrange the time you went. So I went down to Fort Leonard, Missouri in the winter so I could get back in the spring to put my crops in. Could accomplish that. At the same time, part of becoming governor, as I had to go to college. Well, that was no problem. I never pulled the best grades in the world because I liked to be outside. I didn't prefer to stand and study too much. However, if it was involved in agriculture, I read everything I could get on agriculture. So I went to college and I started studying agricultural economics because I had to study economics because if I'm going to be governor, I have to know a little about economy and economic, so that made sense. But after I would put in crops and I would go maybe a quarter, maybe 2 quarters, and I'd put in my crop. And I would miss, and so after 4 years, I'm half through college because I'm working. And I'm sitting and thinking about this, is that this is ridiculous. You've got to get through college. Stop farming. You can come back to it later. Get through college. Get this thing out of the way. Get one thing out of the way. You're dividing yourself up too much. So, I mean, so I went to college. Like I said, I quit college. I quit farming. I stayed in college. Now, another thing, I've got some notes here, things to mention. While I was in college, while my parents were raising me, I went to church. Raise up a child in the way they should go, and they will not depart. But when I got out on my own, and I'm in college, when I got in college, I learned there was no God. I learned there was no God. And you know how that happened? I said, well, God is love. And they said, love? Are you kidding us? Are you kidding me? How can God be love and burn somebody forever and ever and ever and ever? Well, I found that if you don't know the whole truth, the devil has a way of getting in and getting at you. And I got to a point that said there is no God. So I disappointed my Creator. I began to believe. And for 20 years, I believed there was no God. There was no God. Because I didn't know the whole truth. The knowledge of the truth is important. It's vitally important. That's lesson number 2. Knowledge of the truth that I learned is important. Rightly dividing the word of truth. Hearing the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Anything else, the devil can get in and he can get you away. So I believed there was no God. I became an atheist because of that little thing of burning forever and ever. So for 20 years, I was an atheist. I denied him. Well, when I quit farming, I had a little money to go to school, so I started schooling. And it was right after my sophomore year. I'm into my junior year. And when you get in junior, you get to more electives. And I'm sitting there, I'm halfway through the year, and I come in one morning, I wake up, and I have this excruciating pain in my side. I mean, it's just killing me. And what am I going to do? And I went down to the nurses, and she says, I think you have appendicitis. I said, no. Well, I said, I've got some things to do. She said, no. She said, you need to go see a doctor. And I ended up going to the doctor, and the doctor says, you've got appendicitis. I said, well, I've got some things to do with this. That's bullheadedness. He said, well, I'll tell you what. The doctor looked at me and said, we can either operate on your appendicitis or your appendectomy, or maybe you can run around and do it, and your appendix will burst, and it may end up killing you. So he convinced me that it was probably best that I had my appendix out. I remember I called. I said, well, I want to call my mother. We'll take care of it. So they have the surgery. They're done. I'm home. I'm ready to be discharged. And I said, I got to call my mother and let her know. I said, Mom, I'm out of the hospital. She says, what? You're in the hospital? I didn't know you were in the hospital. I said, well, they said they were going to call you. You know, people don't always call. And I came out, and I thought after going a week, and then what happened during that time is it was after the drop-off. After a certain point, you can't drop your classes anymore. At least that was the rules. And that was exactly at that time. God has his way of doing things. Exactly at that time. And I go, oh my, what am I going to do? Well, I said, oh, I can make it through. The bottom line was I didn't have the strength I thought I had. I couldn't stay up as late as I was weak. And I didn't make my grade point average. I should have. And so what? Bye-bye. I was out. I could reapply to college in, I think it was like a year. But right at that time, there was a recession going on. I couldn't find work anywhere. I needed to work. I wasn't farming anymore. I'd pretty well used my money up. I needed to find work. So I'm thinking, smart, I'm thinking, here we go. I know where I can get work. I know where I can get work. I go in the service. I go in active duty. They pay me. But where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Well, remember, I'm going to be governor. This is my mindset. I'm going to be governor. So what am I going to do? Well, while you can serve in the military, it's better off. You're much better off if you've actually been in combat. That was a plus. At least that people are thinking that back then. That was a plus. So I said, there's something going on in this country called Vietnam and Southeast. There's a lot of advisors over there. I said, boy, this thing's going to break open. This is going to break open. So what do? I said, well, I've got to join the service. I've got to be involved in this combat, this conflict that's going on. I've got to be involved. And I'm thinking, well, I can join the Army. I'm already spent 5.5 years in the National Guard. I could join the Army. But I said, if I this is my bad thinking. We go down a lot of paths. But if I joined the Marines, I'm almost guaranteed I'm going to make it into the conflict. I'm almost guaranteed. So what do? I, like a dummy, well, actually it wasn't, I joined the Marines. And after 1.5 years of training, going all the things, I find myself on a ship heading to Vietnam. We didn't get the order until we got out in the ocean. They would open the orders where you're headed. And that was in '65, and we were some of the first units to land in Vietnam at the time. We actually landed, stood offshore, and I watched the ships firing and the planes coming in and dropping, and all the terra firma being ripped from the ground, and I was third wave going in, which is, if you know, third wave is, you're kind of clean up, secondary troops. You're not, but you're sitting there watching this stuff, and you're watching the tracer rounds going back and forth. You're sitting on a ship, and you're the first wave hit, and you've watched all the movies of John Wayne and all the, you're saying, wow, what am I getting into? And you're sitting on the deck, and you're watching the first wave hit the beach. And you're scared. Fear strikes you, and I think maybe I told you about fear. I mean, I'm talking fear. I'm talking knee-knocking, pants-wetting fear. What will you do when you hit the blue? Would you be a coward? Would you hide? Would you do? And all these things are running through my mind. And then I look around at my fellow Marines, the guys I've trained with, and I went through all my sweat, and all of a sudden, fear's gone. Fear's gone. Lesson number 3. Perfect love has no fear, because I love these guys. I didn't want to die. I would do my duty, but I knew I would not cower, I would not hide. And if I must die, I must die. That's like the 3 Hebrew words he says, we talked about it. If you got to die, you're going to die. If that's what your will is, that's what. But I wasn't. Remember, I wasn't a Christian. But I learned this lesson. I believe God taught me this lesson. Well, not only did I stay there, I love my country. I volunteered twice more. In the battalion, they called me the old man. I had more time in the country than anybody else. And after 2.5 years, I came back home. But during that 2.5 years, the country I loved and idealized had changed. Things had changed, and I come back. And what happens? What am I greeted with? Welcome home? No. I'm spit at, I'm cursed at. I'm going, what's going on? All my plans, everything, all these foundations that I've laid, they're deteriorating. And not only do they have problems when I come back, I didn't realize that they didn't recognize post-traumatic stress disorder. What's going on? And welcoming didn't help any. And so what did I do for the next? I went back to college. I got so fed up with politics and stuff, I didn't care much about it. I didn't care if I ever become governor. Because when you idealize something and it doesn't turn out perfect, what happens? You become disappointed in it. And I was disappointed. And I don't want to brag about it. There's nothing to brag about. I drank. I caroused. I had anger issues, massive anger issues, rage. You could call it rage within me. Not as bad as some. We only had 2 Marines in our veterans club. And we hung out together. I mean, I'm saying I drank a 6-pack a night. My GI Bill kept me in the booze. That was the way to ease the pain. I look back at it and I know it now. I can see it clearly. It eased the pain. So between the fighting and the rage and it wasn't anything like it was when I was a little kid. Everything changed. God was there, but man. My friend, he ended up, the only person that could, when I drank, I got lovey. I loved everybody. Oh. When he drank, he got violent. Things, we're affected different ways. But I could control him. I was the only one that controlled him because I was a fellow Marine. And the day I was studying for an exam, one of the other guys came across and he said, you know what happened to Riley? Riley killed a guy last night. And I said, what? In his rage, he was going home with a cab and he reached and snapped the guy's neck. He had flashbacks. Now, he'd seen a lot more action than I had. He had 2 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star. He had a flashback and killed a cab driver taking him home. That's what happened. I mean, war's not. Anyhow, I graduated from college. And I went out and I got a job buying and selling grain off the Minneapolis Grain Exchange, and then later help assistant manager in the elevator. But then my father decided he's going to quit farming. And by this time I have a brother farming, raised there. And I'm talking to my brother and said, well, you run a farm? No, I want to raise my horses. He had some thoroughbred horses he wanted to raise. I said, you don't want to farm? I have no interest. I said, would you care if I talked Dad into letting me farm. So my dream, I'm coming back to my farming. Always wanted to farm. Dad says, yeah, you'll have to have the equipment. I say, and so what he did, he had all of his equipment appraised by 3 different appraisers, and he took the average of the 3 appraisals and said, okay, you can buy my equipment, and you can farm, you rent the land. So that's what I did. I became a farmer. Finally, my dream, I'm farming. 2 years later, by 2 years, I had all the equipment paid for. Wow. I'm kind of like Nebuchadnezzar. I got it, I got it, I got it. Look at me. You know, that was my attitude. Look at me, look what I've accomplished. And then I went to my dad and said, and the next year I made enough I could put a down payment on the farm. I said, I want to buy the farm. And my dad said, nope. I don't know if he wanted to let go, but he said, it's all your inheritance. It's all your inheritance. You and your brothers, it's everybody's inheritance. I said, well, but I'm the only one who wants to farm. The rest of them don't care. Aren't you going to let me? Nope. I said, well, then I'm not going to sit here and fight an estate later on after I farmed this ground for years and years and built stuff. I said, I'm going to have to leave. So I ended up leaving. I always wanted to strike out on my own anyhow, so I took all my equipment and I bought some land up in northern Minnesota. And a lot of the land was never even cleared up there. In fact, I bought land that was what they call virgin ground, and I cleared it. Oh, I was good, man. This is it. And I got up there within 3 years. I was farming 1,600 acres. And that was a big farm at that time, equivalent to 7,000, 8,000 today, if you want to go in perspective. I was one of the biggest farmers up there. And one day, I'm thinking about this. You know, 3 years you've got all of this. Wow. You'll own half the state. You'll have this, you'll have this. And then I said, reality struck home. And I said, well, what difference does it make if you own? You're going to die someday. Who cares? Alexander did this. This person did that. And they're all dead. Who cares? Life has got to be more than just doing this. I'm just not smart enough to figure it out. I'm just not smart enough to figure it out. I got to get wise. I got to have some wisdom, some knowledge. What am I going to do? Then, boom, 20 years later, train up a child in the way they will go, and when they're old will not depart. Suddenly, I remembered that there was a wise man in the Bible called Solomon, and he wrote some things, that's what some things, and it was Proverbs, and I dug it up, and I was looking, and I came across this verse. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I pondered that, and I thought about the fear of the Lord. I said, okay, that is only the beginning. That isn't wisdom. That's only the beginning of wisdom. I didn't know fear, again, meant reverence. So I'm saying, well, there has to be, if there is a God, that's what they're saying, is if you can find a God. And so I began to search for God. I said, well, there was a Christian God. I just happened to be born in a Christian home, but there's Muslim, there's Hindu, and so I went to libraries and I picked out books. I'll use libraries, and I picked out all sorts of books. Anything. I have a Quran. I still have it. I got a Quran. I found a book called Gods from Outer Space. Somebody wrote, and I read that book. I also found a book. It was a pretty good sized book, so quite thick, and it was called The Great Controversy. Yeah. I found it. I said my prayer was, if there is a God, can you show me? If there is a God, you believe God was there trying to help me find my way back home? I'm crying out. He was there. He was doing what he could for me. And then I'm sitting there reading the Great Controversy, and I run into this passage, and she wrote about it. And it could have been any passage, but this is the one that impressed me. Isaiah 44:28, who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and I shall perform all my pleasure, saying to Jerusalem, You shall be built into the temple, your foundation shall be laid. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before me, and to loose the armor of kings, to open before him the double doors, so that the gates will not be shut. And I said, wow. It struck me. 150 years, he's naming the man who's going to come 150 years later, and exactly how he's going to come into the... And I go, this is impossible. And I thought, okay, Stanley, what's going to happen tomorrow? Who knows? Well, what's going to happen 150 years? I don't even know what's going to be happening. I don't even know what's... Maybe they got space. I don't know. And all of a sudden, it struck me. There is a God. See, that really, it was like a 2x4 hitting me. Wake up, there is a God. And my next thing was, there is a God. There really is a God. Now, okay, I need to learn what you want of me. And that was the next thing. There is a God. I've learned from this. There's many prophecies, but this one, somehow he pulled out for me. He showed it to me. And I began to pray. Lord, I want to learn about you. Lesson number 4. If you seek me, you will find me. If you seek with me all your heart. That's lesson 4. If you search for me with all your heart. Lesson number 5 is about the same time. He is in charge. He raises up who he wants and he puts down who he wants. He is in charge. That's lesson number 5. He declares the end from the beginning. He knows all things. And I prayed, and I prayed. What would you have me do, Father? What do you want me to do? Now, I did not go to church. I did not go to church because church was filled with hypocrites. I'm telling you what my thinking is. Church is filled with hypocrites. Why would I want to go to church? I can read the stuff for myself. And I prayed and I studied and I learned. I learned the Sabbath truth. It was probably from I don't know where it come from, probably from the Great Controversy. And finally, I am so filled, I want to tell other people about this God that I know. I have to tell other people about this God that I know. So I want to share him. You've got to have people around, Lord. I said, you've got to have some people around here somewhere who love God. A group of people. And I knew the Sabbath. I didn't know Seventh-day Adventist much. I knew the Sabbath. And I looked, and 25 miles away, there was called the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm going to go to church. You see how God has been working in my life? How I denied him and he brought me back? Or he was there all the time. I finally responded and he picked me up. Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I went by and I said, 9:30 worships, Sabbath school. Okay. I said, that must be time church starts. Well, I'm just going to church as a Methodist. I went at 11 o'clock and it was over with by noon. That was it. So I'm thinking, okay, so I show up at 9:30. 9:30, I'm coming in, nobody else there, and there sits Eleanor Glass, sitting there. She was the administrative assistant for Production Credit Association where I got all my operating loans. And I was one of the bigger farmers. Everybody knew me. I was one of the bigger farmers in the area. Most of them farmed a quarter. So she knew me, and she said, Stan Bedker. I didn't know you were an Adventist. Now I'm walking, and I said, I'm not. I just been doing some reading. And I thought I'd come in. And I imagine that the church is probably about half the size of this one, maybe less. Made up mostly of farmers, truckers, and several doctors, Adventist doctors. How would I know it? And the question is, how do I know that that they would be your church? And the answer came to me from the word which I had already been reading. By their love, you will know them. By their love, you will know them. You see, and I was loved into the church. I can tell you with all sincerity, I was loved into the church. It wasn't the doctrines, it was the love. If you don't feel loved, you don't stay. I was loved into the church. Can you imagine walking in and I didn't know anything about pigs and all. I didn't know all this stuff. I had a rudimentary knowledge. I knew enough. And I would walk in on the Sabbath morning and I said, wow, you won't believe what happened. I had a sow that had 17 little babies this morning, and I'm so happy about. And what their answer? They said, "Oh, you shouldn't be raising pigs. You shouldn't." There was none of that. And they say, "Wow, isn't that wonderful? God's really blessed you, hasn't He?" I go, "Yeah." Had they questioned why I was raising pigs and I probably would have left and sought for another church. But because they didn't judge me, they loved me. And I didn't have a separate class to go to. I attended one of the Sabbath school classes, and we went through the Bible, and I learned all the truths. I learned that I shouldn't be eating pork. And I remember going to one of the truckers and saying, "Well, should I quit raising pigs?" And he said, "I don't know. That's up to you. It's not for me to decide if you should or not." I truck things all the time that, that's my load and I take it. That's between you and God. If you should. And I loved raising pigs. That was my part of my farming thing I loved the most. And I finally decided. He said, "What made you decide you had to get out of it?" I said, "I don't want to have anything that might be a stumbling block for somebody else." I had grown. He was directing me. He was leading my path. I learned that it's not my job. I know what my job is, and that was to love. That's all God said. I am to love. I'm not to judge, but I'm to love. I'm to show the truth and to be the truth and to act the truth, but I'm not to judge anyone. Our job is to love one another. That's lesson number 6. There's only one lesson left. I'm just about done. Lesson number 6. We are to love one another. I learned that lesson. That's what God wants us to do. I was going to be baptized. I was going to start a new life of faith, not by sight. As you get older, I'm 78. As I look back, I can see things in the past, but I can't see things in the future. But I can walk by faith forward. I can look back and see things, but I can walk. But that's what I see in the back and what He's done in my life. I have faith that I can walk forth, that He loves me and will take care of me. I remember getting baptized, and the elder said after I got baptized, he says, "Now the devil is really going to get you. He's going to have all." Well, and he was right, because God moved back certain protections and allowed the devil to do certain things to me, but for my good, because I had some growing to do yet. I learned there's 2 important things. I got to end this. That there's 2 important things in a Christian walk. 2 vitally important. Faith and prayer. Faith and prayer. 1 John 5:14. Now this is the confidence. This is the confidence. This is the faith I have in you, he's saying, that we have in Him. Okay? That what we ever ask, according to His will, He hears us. And if we know that He hears us, whatever we ask, we know by faith that we'll have the petition that we ask of Him. He will answer our prayers. There was two things after I got baptized, and I'm only going to cover up to the point where I'm baptized. In 3 weeks, I'll tell you what happened after I was baptized and the miracles that God performed in my life then. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. And when I got baptized, my prayer was, please, God, don't let anything separate me from you. If anything would be there that would separate, don't let it. That was my prayer. And because I had anger and rage issues, I said, Lord, please, can you help me with these issues? That was the two things I prayed for all the time. And now in a kind of a postscript, I said, be careful what you pray for. Be careful what you pray for. Because God will answer your prayers, but maybe not in the way you think they should be answered. And you'll hear about how he answered my prayers in 3 weeks. Thank you. Lord, take our hearts, live in our hearts, work through us, that your grace and beauty will be known to the world, is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.